I can't expect everyone to read the things I've read with the behind the scenes or have the friends that I have that have worked on the original Star Wars films and the things that they've heard from George, Ralph McQuarrie included, and how he had to draw everything not from this galaxy, from a different galaxy, from a galaxy far, far away, that if you put anything...
Passionate disagreements without crossing the line into toxicity and hate. So, am I doing something similar to Star Wars Theory? I guess.
So just when you thought it was safe to love Andor and hate Star Wars Theory, things got a whole lot more complicated. And unlike some other people, I do try to put an effort in videos. So apologies, I haven't been uploading as much as I used to, but that's going to change real quick. I was just a little confused about where people stood. Since there might be some new people to this debate, I'm going to do some quick recaps, but we're going to focus a little bit on both Theory, Andrew, and Anomaly. So the basic gist is that Narrowdark, as well as Andrew, put out some pretty funny videos attacking and criticizing Star Wars Theory. So you might think they're on the same side, but Narrowdark, I don't know, for reasons, politically attacked Andrew, and Andrew was very mad. And I found good things about the videos that were put out, basically criticizing Theory, but they also had some weak moments and some puzzling moments. So the way I answered it, it's this. Narrowdark does attack Theory and calls him a clown and a moron and silly. However, it's not from the same vantage point as Andrew. So Andrew is praising Andor, despite it being a Disney, right? A Disney project, it will be praised. But Narrowdark is taking basically kind of Anomaly Inc. position that the prequels are amazing and they should be praised and protected as they were made by George Lucas. And Andrew doesn't agree with that. Andrew praises the original trilogy, but hates most of the prequel trilogy. And he thinks that Clone Wars were good in some places, but really flawed in other places. So essentially, Narrowdark is calling both Andrew and Star Wars Theory fake fans, right? Because Theory talks a lot about George Lucas in the prequels, but he tries to show actually Theory 1 doesn't really know Star Wars. I agree there. And he's actually a fake George Lucas fan. I also agree. His reading of the Star Wars films and George's participation is very biased, very distorted. And Theory just saying, oh, I talked to somebody who worked on the film is not helping us. They could be lying or also have a very distorted perspective. It doesn't really help us to assess these films or how valuable they are. So we'll begin with making fun of Theory, but we're going to migrate to criticizing Anomaly Inc., who is criticizing the Andor fan base. He hasn't seen Andor yet, to my knowledge, but he thinks the fan base is out of control, which is ironic because a lot of people make fun of him and his prequel fanboyism.
Thing like a screw or brick from that looks like from a construction site in there, you're immediately going to be brought into this world where that's not the point. George wanted everything to be out of this world.
I can understand not being satisfied with some production choices made on a Star Wars project, especially if they look a bit too earthy. For example, I don't like the space AKs used in the Aldhani heist. I think they could have used some other Star Wars blaster that could have fit really well with what the Rebellion was doing. What happened to all those blasters that the droids were using in the Clone Wars? We could have seen those a bit. But even then, I don't care to ever bring up that point in real discussion about the show.
Star Wars Theory does act elitist because he talks to certain people who may have worked on Star Wars in the past. And for some reason, people think this means he's an expert in Star Wars. Far from it. But
Discussing his toxic takes. I've criticized the way he hosts and amplifies some of the most toxic voices in the fandom, including some YouTubers who have been shown to be bigoted and inflammatory under the guise of discussing a fandom. But let's be honest and let's talk.
Well, I agree with both Narrowdark and Andrew here that really Star Wars Theory has nothing to stand on. So he's claiming, which by the way is a lie. That's a lie, guys, because I was in the chat when Thea responded with Josh about the brick screws controversy, and he just outright lied. First of all, he actually admitted he was wrong. He said, no, Luke's lightsaber has screws. Right. Let's repeat that. Luke's lightsaber has screws, right? So he would have to admit, which is what is really true, Lucas approved of screws. So it doesn't make any sense. He's just lying. In the original clip, which he says we're lying about, and we're not, he says, there's no bricks or screws. That's what he said. He didn't say, according to Ralph McQuarrie. That is not what he said. That is not what he said. So he's just revising history. He's just invoking this appeal to authority, which is not a legit argument.
You're not supposed to have screws in Star Wars. You're not supposed to have like brick walls that we would see in everyday life. Those things don't exist.
fact that you work with someone on a past project that involved George Lucas, so what? At the end of the day, it's what George finally approved and he allowed into Star Wars. And he did allow bricks and screws. So Theory's still wrong. If he's correct, why did Theory get the Yavin thing wrong? Yavin has bricks, but he just got that wrong. But now we're going to get into disagreement with both sides. So Narrowdark just says the whole Disney canon is illegitimate and Andor is bad because it leads to Rey. Okay, well, that's just irrational nonsense. I can praise the prequels. I don't like what it led to, but it is what it is. I mean, I prefer, as a story, episodes 1 and 2. I think the story is stronger, but Revenge of the Sith actually screwed up a lot of things. But nevertheless, that is the story, even if I don't like the conclusion and have many issues and problems with how the prequel trilogy concluded and leads into the OT. That is the story. I can criticize the finale and the conclusion, but still like most of the prequels. That said, I would have to be honest and say Andor does a much better job. Like the quote trilogy it has now with Andor 1 and 2, it fits nicely with the Rogue One, which fits nicely with the first film. It just does a better job of transitioning. But I do agree with Narrow Dark that Andrew is mostly pretty empty. I mean, he gets the things with Theory right, that Theory's wrong about many things, but him wanting to see the droid blasters just sounds stupid. I mean, you don't have to have blasters in every scene in Star Wars. That just doesn't make any sense. So he's trying to concede a point that is an endpoint. So I agree with Narrow Dark. He caught him red-handed, trying to be very slick. So I agree there. However, it is true that the prequels do have problems of their own, which we will get into. So Anomaly Inc. did a series, which was very good on prequel critics getting a lot wrong. But I have to be honest, he just will not concede even reasonable points. So let's take Attack of the Clones, which probably has the worst plot of all the prequels. And boy, it's a doozy. Although I do defend the prequels, I don't defend every aspect. But Anomaly is just being sometimes obnoxious. And it's like, no, you're getting it wrong. There's no need to defend every aspect of the prequels.
No one with a brain has ever made that argument, but Jedi can see the future through meditation, which has been shown in these movies, Anakin being one and Luke being another. However, whether Sith can see the future is unclear. I think it's possible based on the films and how powerful Palpatine is, but I've never once used it as an argument myself.
So anyway, Obi-Wan and Anakin go to protect Padme, and I love how the first person to talk in this scene is Jar Jar. I also love how he literally stops, looks at the camera, and smiles, as if to say, that's right, fuckers, I'm not going anywhere. I'd also like to point out that while we now have more...
So this is really, really interesting that Narrow Dark gets it right, that Star Wars Theory is just basically a fake normie. He clearly has seen the films and even read a little bit of the lore with the EU novels, but really doesn't really have a strong grasp on the material. Also, which I found really intriguing, I know this for a fact, but I want to be fair to Theory and find more evidence. Apparently, he doesn't even do the lore videos. Yeah, he's getting someone else to do all the research for him, so he's a fake fan all the way through. However, Anomaly is a much better fan. I think he's a genuine, passionate fan of the prequels. Still, I can't understand why he's dismissing these legit criticisms. I mean, again, whatever you think about the prequels, one thing that emerges very clearly, it's one of the few things both sides, the haters and the lovers, converge that Palpatine he's insanely powerful. So, Anomaly trying to be nice, saying we don't, strictly speaking, know for sure that Palpatine can read the future. Is like, obviously he can see the future. There's no way this plot can work unless Palpatine has some insight or intuition into the future. Oh, and by the way, in the EU novels, yes, they go into more of his power. So it's like, yeah, he can clearly, quote, see into the future in some way. Obviously, it's murky, but he can see the future a little bit. And Anomaly's debating Cosmo. We're not going to get into Cosmo too much, but I think Cosmo's basic point is correct. Namely, how is it possible that Sidious can see the future this much to manipulate the Jedi, win the wars, and take over, but he could not see that Vader would kill him? It's just like, oh, that's just mighty convenient. And I guess like, well, that is the will of the Force. The Force seems to be actually guiding the story and the characters, and if that is how it is, that is how it is. However, it could be done a lot better. It could be written and directed a lot better. So I agree with Anomaly that the prequels are hated on for bad reasons. But there are good reasons to hate the prequels and to be very angry and to hold George Lucas to account. There's nothing wrong with that. And I also agree that Star Wars Theory just leaning on, hey, talk to the director, the production, blah, blah, blah. It's just a bunch of nonsense. These people could be lying to us. George could be lying to us. We have to be very careful looking at production history. Who is telling the truth? But as we close out, I just want to correct Narrow Dark on one aspect, although there's a lot I disagree with him on. Namely, talks about him being a fence sitter with Star Wars Theory. I don't think he's that. I just think he's a lunatic. I think we're making him more intellectual than he really is. He's just a crazy moron. That's it. He just got really lucky doing a few stupid videos, and that is how YouTube works. You get a few viral videos, you can get millions of followers and not know what the hell you're talking about. So his videos are pretty strong, deconstructing how little Star Wars Theory knows. Anomaly Inc. by far knows way more of the Star Wars Theory, but he gets a lot wrong too. So it just seems that the people who have a lot of doubts about Andor and the Andor fandom, you can have your doubts, but they're not very substantial. They just seem to be very weak or badly argued. I mean, I'm willing to be open minded as to why Andor is bad, but I'm not getting much so far, at least not by these people.